I probably fell in love with Janet Jackson on Different Strokes. Because before then, she was Penny on Good Times. And she was good on there, but she was a little girl. She probably actually had stronger material on Good Times than Different Strokes. But yeah, but she was a little girl. And then, you know, and then we see her again, and then she's on Different Strokes playing Willis's girlfriend, Charlene. And I was like, oh my God, she's so pretty. I hate you, Todd Bridges. Kissing my girl. But yeah, she was great. But she was on Fame too. But she was also making albums, and the albums just weren't consistent enough, right? While her brother Michael was just killing everybody. So then word came that she was going to work on her new album with J Jam and Terry Lewis. Now, at that point, they had worked with Pharrell and SOS Band and Alexander O'Neal. So you figured from an R&B side, this was going to be some hits, right? But you had no one had no idea how big Control would be, not just on the R&B side, but on the pop side. That was a monster album, which opened the door for someone like Jody Watley, who could do pop R&B stuff too. So, I mean, that door, Janet kicked down the door of Control, and then her and Jimmy and Terry goes back into the studio to talk about the album that just turned 35 years old today, or this week, Rhythm Nation 1814. It has 7 top 5 hits on the Billboard Hot 100 chart. It was the first album to produce 4 number 1 hits in 3 separate calendar years. Yeah, that's true. The album came out in 1989, and the last single was 1991. You'd be hard-pressed to find an album that goes a year and a half these days. I don't know if because the music isn't as strong or record companies are lazy, but for an album to go 3 years, it's almost non-existent today. Like, even if you go back to maybe back in the 2010s, like Katy Perry's Teenage Dream, that album lasted forever. Rihanna's stuff her albums lasted forever. It just seems like it feels like after Rihanna's Anti, they just stopped promoting albums more than a year. Like, if you look at Taylor Swift stuff, she drops an album almost like every year. But they just, instead of just like, the goal should be that make a great album and push this album as long as you can. But no, it's almost like we gotta get something new out all the time. It's like, I don't know. It's almost like they're rushing the product too much. But back to Control. So, Rhythm Nation. So Rhythm Nation topped the Billboard Top 200 for 4 weeks, which you feel like it would have been number 1 a lot longer, but that means she was in the top 5, the top 10, the top 20, and top 40 for a long time. It sold 12 million plus copies worldwide and added to the National Recording Registry. The fascinating thing about Rhythm Nation is that it only won 1 Grammy. In fact, Janet didn't win any Grammys for Control, which is just ridiculous. But she won her first Grammy with Rhythm Nation, but it wasn't for album and it wasn't for any of the songs. It was for the long-form video. For some of you who do not know, Janet, when Rhythm Nation first came out, she made a long video like Thriller, but that album dealt with social issues. It was in black and white. It was really good. That's where you had Miss You Much, where she did the routine with the chairs. Rhythm Nation with the 5, 4, 3, 2. I think State of the World was on there. I think Knowledge was on there. It was a really good video. I think the video overall, people don't talk about that video because it was a good video. It's just people don't talk about it like they talk about Thriller. People are always going to talk about Thriller. And Rhythm Nation was her attempt at it. And it was good. It just didn't have the same type of impact. But for 1989, it was good. But the fascinating thing also is that Rhythm Nation wasn't nominated for Best Album. It had 7 top 5 hits and wasn't nominated for Best Album. Now, 2 albums that was nominated. The one that also didn't win was Please Hammer Don't Hurt 'Em by MC Hammer, which had You Can't Touch This on it. Again, that album is a groundbreaking album. There's a lot of hip-hoppers who made a lot of money because Hammer crossed over, and they should always give that dude his respect. But the album that did win Album of the Year for the Grammys was Quincy Jones Back on the Block. Now, if you ask me, Kev, I can either give you Back on the Block to listen to today or Rhythm Nation to listen to today. I'm taking Rhythm Nation 100% of the time. Back on the Block was a good album from 1989, but it wasn't better than Rhythm Nation. But I will say, as iconic as Quincy Jones is, and as great as Quincy Jones is, because he's one of the best producers ever, he created Vibe Magazine, created Fresh Prince, very smart man. There are 2 songs that we still hear today from that album. We hear Secret Garden, which featured Barry White, James Ingram, El DeBarge, and Al B. Sure. So that song is a staple on Quiet Storm stations, on R&B stations. But we also hear Tomorrow by Tevin Campbell. That's when Quincy introduced us to the great Tevin Campbell with the song Tomorrow, where he sounded like a 12-year-old Michael Jackson. You can go anywhere you want. I can't remember the first time I heard Tomorrow, I was like, is that an old Michael Jackson song? It's like, no, it's some kid named Tevin. Tevin who? That whole voice. Oh my God. I listened to Tomorrow like a month ago. The vocals of a young Tevin Campbell was fantastic. And then he had Can We Talk and all this stuff come later. But Tomorrow is so really good. We just don't hear it that much, but it's so good. But Rhythm Nation was a monster, man. Especially coming off Control. Like, who knew that Rhythm Nation would be this good? And the thing about it was like, and it lasted for so long. So in the beginning, you had a lot of black and white videos. Then at the end, you had like Love Will Never Do was like the last hit song. And Herb Ritz, I think, did the video. And it was kind of black and white-ish too, but it had a different tint to it. But then they also had the color version. And Janet looked great. She does look fantastic, right? But I think that video set us up for the Janet album. Where in the beginning, everything was in black and white. Janet was in pants, was, very regimented and all that stuff. We get to a very sexy Janet at the end, which led to the sexiness of the Janet album. And each thing, that's the beauty about, I don't think she gets enough credit for the themes that she had for each album. Like Control was about her finding control away from her family. Rhythm Nation was socially conscious. Janet was about her sexiness and womanhood. And then The Velvet Rope was like her most open about her life. But none of those albums won a Grammy. None of those albums, she's only won 5 Grammys, but she never won Album of the Year. The closest was Control. The only time she was nominated for Album of the Year was for Control. Nothing for Rhythm Nation, nothing for Janet, and nothing for The Velvet Rope. This is ridiculous. And the fact that she's only won 5 Grammys is even worse. Like, the Grammys, when it comes to, like, her and Mariah Carey have been screwed over so much. And I don't think Janet really gets the love that she gets for being a songwriter, for being a iconic video maker. Listen, Michael Jackson changed the video game for everybody. Michael is always going to be that dude. But I don't think Janet gets enough love. Like, even this video for All Right, she did it with Cab Calloway and Heavy D, rest in peace. And she was in a zoot suit. It was in Technicolor. You know, when I name you a Janet Jackson's video, you know what it is. If I mention the Prezzo Principle, you know what it is. If I mention If, you know what that is. That's the Way Love Goes, you know what it is. Rhythm Nation, the dance stuff with Rhythm Nation, like, she really doesn't get enough love for the brilliance of her videos. And now I look over here at the Grammys, like, again, Taylor Swift has 4 albums of the year, and Beyonce I think she has the most wins for the Grammys, right? And kudos to them, right? But you give me 4 straight of their albums, Beyonce and Taylor, and I can give you Control, Rhythm Nation, Janet, and The Velvet Rope. Song for song, album for album, it blows both of them away. You could be the biggest Bey fan, and I'm not knocking her at all, but you can't tell me 4 Beyonce albums in a row are better than Janet's 4 albums in a row. You can love Taylor Swift and everything she's done, but you can take for her 4 albums of the year and put them against those 4 Janet Jackson albums, and you can't tell me her 4 albums are better than Janet's. I think one of the issues is her brother is so big. Like the mystique of Michael Jackson is so big that we kind of forget that Janet was great as well. Yeah, she wasn't the vocalist her brother is or was. That's why it's always ridiculous when people try to compare anybody to Michael Jackson. The only person I can compare to Michael Jackson is probably Tevin Campbell at 12. But nobody can be compared to Michael Jackson. But it's kind of hard-pressed to compare anybody to Janet Jackson. The only person I can think of that's equal to her in a lot of ways is probably Rihanna. You know, Sierra's influenced by Janet Jackson, and she loves Janet Jackson, but she's not as great as Janet Jackson. Tiana Taylor is influenced by Janet Jackson. She loves Janet Jackson, but she's not Janet Jackson. Rihanna's the only one I can think of from a video-wise and a hit singles-wise that comes close. And the beauty about Janet is she has this sweet, sexy thing. So on one hand, it's like, oh my God, she's so sweet. You want to pinch her cheeks. And next thing you know, oh my God, how did I get tied up on the stage? Not only does she have the sexiest walk, God took a day off after he made her walk. Praise Jesus. Because she had the sexiest walk ever. But she got this sweet thing. I was like, oh my God, so sweet and lovely. And then the next thing you know, she's riding you like a stripper. It's like, wait a minute, where did these handcuffs come from? I love Janet Jackson. And she will fight you. She loves her brothers so much. She will punch you in your face if you say anything bad about her brothers. She's pretty perfect, man. So if you're looking for an album to listen to for a long time, listen to Rhythm Nation, man. Underrated, underappreciated, and it's hard to believe it's been 35 years. I am getting old.